Welcome to Great Railways. We're going to show you a historic film of 4472, the Flying Scotsman, making a non-stop run from London to Edinburgh in 1968, which was the 40th anniversary of the first time the non-stop run had been made over that route. And also, we're going to show you a film, The Romance of the Indian Railways, which is a great romance indeed. At that time, 12 years ago, when the Flying Scotsman film was made, it was thought that steam was on the way out. The locomotives, in a very short time, 13 years, 18,000 locomotives had been withdrawn from traffic, and they were languishing in scrapyards. Some of them were preserved, some of them went to museums, but it was generally thought to be the end. But now everything is different. Even the most die-hard modernists realize that there's money in steam trains, and a great amount of preservation work is taking place. But then, in addition to that, you've got this marvelous miniature railway run by John Southern down here near Liscard, Cornwall, England. This is a miniature of a part of the Union Pacific Railroad, and John Southern here carries passengers in their tens of thousands up a replica of the great Sherman Hill in Wyoming, where the gradient is 1 in 65. Now he has built also a line where the gradient is exactly the same. And to do that work, he's got to have pretty powerful locomotives. And John Southern hasn't done things by halves. He's got a model here of the largest steam locomotive that was ever built anywhere in the world, the Union Pacific Big Boy. It's a colossal thing with a wheel arrangement of 4884. The front driving unit is articulated to get round tight curves with the steam pipes flexible. There's an enormous boiler with a twin orifice blast pipe, 3 safety valves each side. The original engines had a working pressure of 300 pounds per square inch. This one works at 100. These monsters needed so much coal that one man couldn't fire them, and they had mechanical stokers. They worked very heavy trains up Sherman Hill and brought the loaded eastbound fruit trains from California. The original locomotive has a weight of 535 tons. This one weighs 2 tons. It's interesting that although there were 25 of these in America originally, and 3 of them have been preserved, this is the only one in the world that is still a working big boy. Now let's see our steam. Now we must leave the Forest Railroad Park and turn to 4472. Not this beautiful little model which is in front of me now, the first 00 gauge model of the Flying Scotsman, but the real thing. In 1968, Alan Pegler organised a non-stop run from King's Cross to Edinburgh by the Flying Scotsman in celebration of the 40th anniversary that run was made. It was also very important to make it at that time because the water troughs would have been taken up. In the train, notice two celebrated authors in conversation with each other. The Reverend Audrey of Thomas the Tank Engine fame and C. Hamilton Ellis. And also, you will note that in two places, the exhaust beat of the engine, as rendered by the soundtrack, doesn't agree with the speed of revolution of the wheels.
The age of steam has finally gone. All that remains now is the memory and the metal carcasses and the long wait for the breaker's torch. The steam engine is one of the most potent symbols of an era of both ruthless prosperity and bitter struggle, of a time when each machine had an individuality that a man could respect and come to terms with in a way that no longer exists. In 1923, Sir Nigel Gresley's new A3 class Pacific locomotive, Flying Scotsman, was a part of this tradition. 5 years later, on the 1st of May 1928, it pulled out of King's Cross Station on the first non-stop run from London to Edinburgh. In 1934, it was the first steam locomotive to reach 100 miles an hour, and by then the name Flying Scotsman had acquired a special glamour it has never really lost. After 2 million miles of service, Flying Scotsman made its last run for British Rail in 1963. It was bought the same year by businessman Alan Pegler. He restored it to its former LNER glory and has run it ever since on steam excursions for railway clubs and societies.
Of course, when one buys a piece of machinery like the Flying Scotsman and intends running it, especially non-stop to Scotland, one has to have somewhere to keep and maintain it. At the time, one had to look around with an eye to the future, and one found that Doncaster was one of the few locomotive depots left that could cope with this kind of work. It was near the family business, and of course the Flying Scotsman itself was built here, so back here she came. One simply pays the rent and all the bills, and British Railways do the rest.
They want a lot more maintenance, you know, fire dropping, lighting up, calling, washing out, fitting, etc. You know, I think
I'm lucky enough to have the services of a number of retired railwomen who keep her looking the way she should look. And I'm pretty certain the reason they do this is not because of the present-day glamour attached to the Flying Scotsman, but the fact that they're able to recapture a way of life that they possibly grumbled about as young men, but which nevertheless became a part of living that they felt they had lost forever.
you came to work, you had a snap tin, you were packed up, you didn't know how long that snap was going to last you. I mean, you might be away as long as 16 hours on occasions. Many a time come home to a dried up dinner or a wife in a bad temper. I've seen my children at home, they said, "Hello, Dad, are you going to work?" "No, I'm not." "Oh, you'll be going to bed then." And that's the kind of thing he used to get. It was either all work and no pleasure, or all work or all bed. That's how it used to be. There's none of that nowadays, I don't suppose.
It's rather a strange feeling, though, after, well, I was working it out, it's about 3.5 years, really, this exercise first was mooted, and now that it's finally come to the morning, it's rather like, I suppose, a diver on the high board waiting to take the plunge, and I really can't wait now to get on the footplate and get on with it. How much do you think we've got on there now?
9 ton 15.
9.5,
We've got that, we'll be well away.
Yeah. Should be ample all the way through.
Yeah. Yes. Good. Well, we've got to do the remaining topping up before we move off.
She's burnt all that coal coming up light. She's burnt a lot, hasn't she? She's burnt a bit.
Right. Extra coal up here, and it's rather difficult to get the thing to open it. In the old days, of course, when there were plenty of steam locomotives running everywhere, there was no problem. The water was treated in advance. Now, you never know what sort of water you're going to get. So we treat our own in this way. these briquettes will fill in here, and gradually during the journey, these get dissolved into the water, and it ensures that you get nice clean water in the boiler, and it makes the boiler last a great deal longer. At least that's the theory anyway.
We've got to stop in. Half a minute, I'm going to test it. Half a minute.
The object, as far as I was concerned, was to be allowed to have a go. And it is an extraordinary thought, in my opinion anyway, that on a great nationalized undertaking, one can take out a private piece of machinery 45 years old and hitch it onto a train of British Railways stock and take 300 people 400 miles on a weekday in the middle of all the other services. Let's face it, I mean, this is a pretty sporting gesture on the part of the British Railways Board, in my opinion anyway.
I'm not able to go on the run today, but I just wanted to come and see my dear old engine again to say how do and wish her good luck.
Right away.
I met my wife for the very first time on this Flying Scotsman train on the 1st of May 1928. And therefore, this journey is giving me the most tremendous thrill. But my wife didn't even know it was a non-stop, and certainly not the first non-stop run. And she was ensconced in another carriage, but an elderly, a more elderly lady who was supposed to be keeping an eye on her had booked her a seat in our compartment. Much to her disgust, she took her away from a very pleasant, youthful surroundings and brought her into our carriage, where she was horrified to find we'd got a parson.
And I was really rather cross about this, and I said in French to Mademoiselle Lecoeur, it's very sad to bring me in here when I was having such a lovely time on the other end, you know, and making me sit next to a parson and making me behave myself for the rest of the journey. And he just turned round and answered in perfect French. And I was really completely shattered about this. However, he was extremely nice, and he gave us a wedding present, I remember, so he wasn't too cross with me in the end.
There were only the four of us there, and everybody was fearfully matey and excited about this, and we were being greeted on the way by waving crowds with flags and banners, and all the town bands were turning out. Everybody on the train got most tremendously friendly. A terrific excitement, a sense of occasion. And so naturally, when the time came for lunch, I suggested to my new friend, Molly Payne as she was then, what about coming to have a spot of lunch with me? And she was very young in those days and very shy, as indeed she still is, and would not accept my invitation to go and have lunch with her in the dining car. However, the parson made it all right, and he said, well, perhaps you may allow me to invite you both, and then that will be all very seemly and proper. In those days, one bothered about such things. And we went to lunch, and during the rest of the journey, we got on like a house on fire, and we were engaged within 3 weeks' time. And so I was let in for 40 years hard labor.
Well, I think that it was 40 years hard for me, not for you, anyway.
Why on earth is a long journey behind a steam locomotive? It's so nice for some people, for me certainly, and to other people it's perfectly horrible.
It's the smell, familiar smell of smoke and the beat of the engine and the feeling that you're being pulled not by a mechanical box on wheels, but by something pulsing and alive.
It's an aesthetic experience. It's a good railway journey by a steam train. A good journey by an electric train is a nice experience. And any journey by train, as long as you can't smell diesel exhaust too much. But a good journey by steam, it's a realized work of art.
feel that this train in particular, 40 years after it first ran, is very important. Same engine, agreed, a lighter load, but vitally important still. The railway services in this country have been cut back more and more, and to be able to show that a good old steam train can still do it, I think will make us very proud. Everybody on this train very proud.
We got 49, 11 and 3, 14 with 14.
Well, I spent 47 years on the railways.
Yes.
And it's a big change from my days to what it is today. And that's what I've come for today, because I think I'm approaching 80. And I think it'll be last time I shall see a steam engine.
Especially model steam trains, because it opens up a very wide field there, because you can now buy models of steam trains with the real smoke and even synchronisation with the wheels.
Well, that's one of the typical sort of dodgy things that you can't legislate for. Apparently a broken rail being replaced, and nothing you can do about it. We go literally down to walking pace, but quite literally the wheels did just keep turning, so we can still honestly say we haven't stopped. But it's a damn sight too near for comfort.
background. And quite naturally, the interest transferred itself to my son. And when he was ill with measles at the age of 3, it was most natural for me to tell him stories about trains. And he said, "Daddy, what are the engines' names?"
That's the way.
And I invented names on the spur of the moment: Edward, Gordon, Henry, and so on. There was Edward's Day Out, Henry in the Tunnel, and then there was another story based on a story I'd read in the magazine about a Highland Railway banker being left behind. This was the story of how Gordon got stuck on the hill and had to be rescued by Edward, the engine whom he despised, banking him in the rear. But once Edward had started him off, Gordon was able to go on fast, and poor Edward ran out of steam and got left behind. And so there it was. And the first book, 3 Railway Engines, was published in 1945.
You know, we two, Audrey, we rather remind me of 2 of your engine characters talking. And, for that matter, what about Bret Hart's thing? Let's wind up with him. That was what the engines said, unreported and unread. Spoken slightly through the nose with a whistle at the close. Doesn't it?
Yes, certainly.
Should be done in an American accent, though, which I didn't attempt.
D3577. Just come past.
77. Thank you.
There's another one over there, but I don't think I can spot it.
In about 3 years...
D104.
184.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
About 3 years ago, I started collecting the numbers, simply then for something to do while I was watching the trains. But then I sort of got hooked on it, and well, when getting near to completing a class, well, you want to carry on and try and complete it.
Tie it up too? Right, Archie.
Well, this is the highly dodgy situation that I hoped we were not going to find ourselves in, that we are now in. We've had 2 rather poor pickups of water and only 1 good one out of 3. And it's really a question now as to whether to take the water that we have got laid on in reserve at Berwick-on-Tweed, or whether to take a calculated risk, I suppose is the term, and carry on beyond the point of no return and try and make Edinburgh. Now, this sort of decision is not mine. I'm not a professional railwayman. I'm merely an enthusiast, and obviously my inclination would be to press on and have a go. But the people who carry the can, if anything does go wrong on this, are really the Chief Motive Fire Inspector and his number 1. That's to say, Les Richards and George Harland, and they're having a conference up on the engine at the moment, and that's why I've come back into the train so that I don't in any way influence them. We shall know within a matter of minutes now whether we're going to do any more.
Inspector Richards and myself consider that with 3,000 gallons of water we have sufficient to take us to Edinburgh.
The point where we could have got some emergency water was there at Berwick-on-Tweed, and by being switched around the little goods loop, we were right alongside a road tanker that had 4,000 gallons of water in it. I don't know how much we've got on board, but my guess would be, with the mileage we've got to do, we've probably got about 2,500 to 3,000 gallons. I don't know.
You look
I will go in a minute and find out, because I don't know.
You looked very cool when we nearly came to a stop outside Berwick.
I think
must have been a very emotional moment.
It's absolutely fatal to do this sort of exercise as if one's going to do one's nut every time anything goes wrong, because I mean, one knows from experience, I have been lucky enough to be able to do this kind of run, not this drama, but this sort of run many times over the last 5 years, and it's rather the exception if things do go completely without a hitch. They do sometimes go completely without a hitch, but usually there's a difficult decision somewhere or other to be taken about something or other.
You are aware, presumably, that there are 1,800 pints of beer on board?
Well, that would be a great help, of course, a great comfort. We might be very glad of that. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think she'd probably run very well on light ale.
Sad about
the steam going. Yes, there was something about a steam train that it had its own each engine had its own personality, you know, and you don't see that with the diesels.
We, sir, regard railways both in the museum, the historical sense and the modern sense. And while we regret the passing of the steam engine, nevertheless we consider that British Railways by 1970 will be the best in the world. The nation that forgets its past has no future. Let's leave it at that.
What are you here today, madam? To let my little boy see the Flying Scotsman. He's never seen a steam train. He's mad about trains.
Does he know it's the Flying Scotsman?
Yes, oh yes.
What's the train called?
I don't know.
Well, I think from time one is a little boy right on to manhood, a train and railway has always got a fascination. And I think today to know that after 40 years, we're still able to do this journey of nearly 400 miles non-stop, I think is still part of that fascination.
see you a bit later for a drink.
Okay. Yes, I'll come and do
Very delighted to have got here non-stop. That was the main object of the exercise, to do it without stopping, and although we had one or two very, very close calls, got down to walking speed once or twice, we did in fact achieve it without stopping at all. And I think we got here just about 30 minutes inside the old 1928 timing. Admittedly with a lighter load, but anyway, it's pretty good, I think, with an engine now 45 years old. When she did it 40 years ago, she was a youngster, and now she's not as young as she was. Done well over 2 million miles, and I think to have done that run after all those years is really quite an achievement.
So much for 4472. That was a very atmospheric occasion because everybody thought that steam was going out and was going to be dead in a very short time. But actually 4472 is still alive and well, and it's stationed up at Carnforth and in frequent use for special trains and hired by British Railways. And now for the romance of the Indian Railways, where steam again is very much alive. The motive power situation out there is that about 1/3 is steam, 1/3 diesel, and 1/3 electric.
There are those who love the splendid steam train, the great and disappearing iron horse. And there are those who love India. And there are, happily, those who love both, knowing that the one was made by the other. Romantic amateurs of the history that runs on rails and that which stands changelessly since the days of the Moguls, this is an affectionate salam to the past that created the present. Now, of course, development means diesel, a thing of little charm and no chuff, but that is progress. India makes her own engines now, and even exports them. Urban India couldn't live without its railways. Imagine a commuter traffic into one Bombay station alone of nearly 1.5 million a day. A rush hour train every 3 minutes, each with 4,000 people aboard, or almost aboard, all packed so tight it's almost impossible to pick a pocket. Of the 2,800 million Indians who use the railways every year, nearly half are commuters. The suburban lines have been electrified these 40-odd years, obviously had to be, to handle this sort of sardine traffic. How could India do without the electric train? Well, in many places, luckily, it does. The Puffing Billy is still the workhorse of the countryside and of the hills. And its lover, historian, and defender of the faith is a dedicated English zealot whose life's purpose now is the preservation of the great Indian steam train in a permanent museum in Delhi. His name is Mike Sato.
The first railway that I can recall ever turning me on was the Mataran Railway. I think that's one of the most exciting little railways, built most improbably, very little known by anyone outside India. But it stems from the early days of this century. It's the only link with Mataran and the outside world. And it represents a technical achievement of some magnitude, even though the scale is small. I think a very good historical relic of the sort of technical ingenuity that was being practiced in the late 19th century. The railway itself is 12 miles of track, which on the map only covers 4 miles from point to point, but in the course of that it rises 2,000 feet. There are 281 curves, and probably the sharpest curve on any working railway in the world, because the radius is only 45 feet. And to get round these corners, they have special engines, which were the brainchild of a dilettante engineer, Sir Arthur Hayward, a landed gentleman in Derbyshire, and his hobby was railways, and he used to build his own engines. And they are the only known examples of this type of engine in existence in the world, and furthermore, they're all working, and working very well. There are 4 steam engines on this railway which, since 1907, have been hauling the trains up and lowering them down. Outwardly rather conventional engines, but inwardly rather complicated and very novel engines, which must be a full justification for the design which went into them on a landed estate in Derbyshire.
Mike Sato was once managing director of ICI in India. For 15 years he lived in the country. Retired to England, he resolutely returns twice a year to the India he loves and the trains he loves perhaps even more. 36,000 miles of railway spread a net over India, uniting this huge country as nothing else could do. This was the one wholly bountiful legacy bequeathed to India by a British Raj, perhaps the only one. It all began in Bombay, and its memorial and temple is Victoria Terminus. Victoria Terminus was built, as was the manner of the 1880s, in the likeness of a shrine, a technological cathedral, a great caravanserai in the most flowering Victorian Gothic Saracenic Italianate Oriental St. Pancras Baroque, to the glory of Her late Imperial Majesty and that of the great steam train. so the British bequeathed to India the trains and the stations and the currency of a common language, and you might say a touch of the class system too, though India had hardly need of that. The old times of the Raj also provided the rolling stock, and some of these old beauties still remain, largely thanks to Mike Sato, whose dream, now taking shape in Delhi, is the Railway Museum, where the first of the old iron elephants is going. Not to die, but in fact to live.
Must be a historic journey if ever. Did you manage to get the boiler examination done before it came?
Yes.
At Upper Chandazi? What's it like?
It is very good.
Is it?
We have got it tested.
So that means really we've only got minor repairs like the front spring pins and things to do?
Yes, only minor repairs.
Has it been running order?
Yes. Everything.
Fairy Queen is only the first of our exhibits. There are hundreds more to come. When the museum's finished, it should be the most comprehensive, perhaps one of the largest in the world.
400 years ago, the great and wise Mughal Emperor Akbar built the city of Fatehpur Sikri near Agra, abandoned within 50 years because its wells ran dry. Now it is a thing of dead beauty, a monument.
I want to see India's industrial heritage preserved as well as her monuments. After all, the Taj Mahal doesn't have much of a break-up value as scrap, but unfortunately a locomotive does. So unless we preserve them today, they'll just disappear. My wife Peggy, of course, had rather different interests from mine. She was very much involved with Indian art, Indian music, charitable work, and on many occasions we've been traveling together for long periods, perhaps in Indian trains, because journeys are long, travel on railways over long distances becomes almost a way of life. A journey may take 2, 3, 4, 5 days even. And so you take your cooking equipment, you take your sleeping equipment, you may sleep in a railway coach, you may sleep in a station platform. Life goes on, and in the course of it, you ultimately move across the subcontinent.
The evening brings that imperative of the night, the ubiquitous bedroll. The bedroll, turning up each evening. No one who knows India will ever forget it, nor ever remember it without nostalgia, maybe, for the great railway names, the Frontier Mail, the Deccan Queen, the Brindavan, the Rajdhani Express, and even, perhaps, for the empire on which the sun did finally set.
One of the interesting things about the research work and the investigation work that I've been doing for this museum has been the need to go off into all sorts of very remote corners of India. The Rajasthan desert, for example, held out the prospect of finding a special class of 5 locomotives. I had reason to believe that some of the engines that were there had now disappeared or were laid aside, so I wanted to go and investigate for myself what in fact was still working there.
What a place is India for the engineer. Not only huge, but hostile. Rivers to be bridged, jungles to be cut, mountains to be tunneled. Nothing is easy in India, but it gets done. There are 1.75 million Indians working on the railways, by far the biggest employer in the land. The gangmen on the track pause to give a quick namaste to the official trolley.
Well, you know, we have to give them they have priority.
What sort of token system do you use here, or block system?
This section, I suppose, is on needles ball token instrument. That's a small token, you know, and I'll show you at the next station. And that instrument is lock and block. You see, if it cannot be operated by simultaneous coordination of the two station masters.
I see.
And not more than one token can be taken out from one end.
So only one driver can have a token?
Yes.
The signal system works with some elaboration. The pointsman takes the token from the trolley. He then inserts it in the signal. He takes the key, approaches the lever, and pulls it. The points then change. The pointsman runs over to the point and locks it. He pulls the signal lever and the signal goes down. This wonderful rigmarole not only fulfills the Indian love of complication, it's also safe.
These are the gangmen, you know, who maintain the track.
Typical Rajasthan gang.
Yes,
You
Mr.
wouldn't have to
Bijlani's
ask
men.
anybody if you looked out of the window.
Mr. Bijlani's men.
You see, they are belonging to a particular Rawat tribe.
Yes.
Which used to be in olden days criminals.
Were they?
Yes.
You've tamed
before
them.
the railways came into being. After the railways have come into being, we have reformed them.
I went out into the Kumbligat section on a single meter gauge line, and for working the heavy mineral trains, special engines were built in 1929, and they've been working there ever since. One engine on the front, one engine on the back. And since 1929, these 5 engines have been shouldering this massive task of moving the tonnage of freight up this incline, and are still in fighting fettle. So you're relaying this with 75 pound?
Yes, we have relayed this track only about 3 years ago.
Yeah. Is this old stuff
Yes,
over
that
here?
is these track. That is
Huh?
these track. That is
Oh, look at
these
it.
track. Have a look. Have a look.
I'll say it's old. Come here, look. Look at it. Got rolling marks on it. These are 1887. These are older than anything I've got in the museum so far.
I didn't know that.
Yes, they are. I'd like some of these. What are you doing with this?
See, we have intimated this weight of these old rail store headquarter office for disposal orders as scrap.
All right, let's just see what lengths these are. 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 30 footers.
Yes, you are absolutely right. These are 30-foot rails. You are right.
Will you keep checking for me?
Yes,
Huh?
well,
Can you do
kindly
that?
get the orders. so that I have the necessary authority.
All right, I'll do that.
The Indian railways are an enormous absorbent of labour, the one commodity perhaps of which the nation is never short. They are as hierarchical as India itself. There are those who are saluted, and there are those who salute. Those 36,000 miles of railway track need endless maintenance and almost endless men, which is not indeed a bad thing on the whole. But this immense system of communications needs all manner of men, all manner of skills and crafts and backroom techniques. The days are done when the lines were shared among many companies, the Great Indian Peninsula, the Madras Company, the Bombay, Baroda and Central India, the Jamnagar Dwarka and dozens more. Indian railways belong to India now. An awful lot of it still depends on that good old fossil fuel coal. And a good thing too, since India has quite a lot of coal and not much oil. And coal is comparatively cheap and oil is ferociously dear. In consequence, however, a good deal of this loose coal gets itself nicked, as indeed do most movable and stealable assets of the railways sometime or another. Therefore, someone has to keep a pretty close eye on the scene. And before you triumphantly interrupt, let us agree that this scene was set up. It was enacted as, shall we say, a training exercise for the railway police.
The great advantage of the steam engine is that it's very cheap to build, it's very reliable, and it can be maintained by more or less anyone. The steam locomotive is a labour-intensive machine compared with the diesel or the electric. But on the other hand, labour is available in India and is very well versed in maintaining the steam engine.
They have, of course, to go to training schools to learn the complications of the modern systems.
Any indication on the signal post. Now, sometimes this signal becomes defective. That time, the driver or the motorman is authorized by the station master to pass that signal by written authority, which on our Western Railway is prescribed on Form T88B. Second signal under this system of working is semi-automatic stop signal.
Howrah in Calcutta is the biggest passenger station in all India. Just a glance at Howrah shows how much of India's economy relies on the rail. Not just the passengers, but all the other businesses who depend on the station. The taxis, the coaches, the rickshaws, and the porters. 1,800 of them in Howrah alone, unpaid and living on backsheesh. But still, it's the ironmongery of this great business that absorbs Mike Sato. The locomotives, their hisses and snorts, to be recorded here and recollected in tranquility.
WPP, one of the prototype WP class built by Baldwin's, of which there are 7 left, shedded at Faizabad, and number 7208 comes into Varanasi Cantonment Station, and this one happens to be drawing behind it one of the standard tenders because I see the bogies.
Udaipur was once a princely state of great prestige and renown. The Lake Palace is now a tourist hotel of equally great prestige and renown, perhaps the loveliest in India. There in the middle of the Pichola Lake in an unspoiled town with the Dhobi Ghats coming down to the water's edge, you would think you had everything. But Mike Sato dreams only of trains.
Ram Kumar, the curator of the museum, had only recently been appointed, and there was much to show him. You can't learn everything by just looking into dusty files. I took him around with me on several visits. One of the more exciting ones, I think, from his point of view, was the monorail at Patiala. But there's the engine shed, and the track coming in here, and another track over there. Here's the remains of one of the passenger coaches, and here is Colonel Bowles' saloon, with some of the original paintwork and lining on it, so we can get all that. And then up at the front here, we've got the engines. Let's go and have a look at those for a start. This one's very good, but unfortunately, the boiler's missing off this one, and I can't find it anywhere at all. They're in splendid condition, you know, because these things haven't worked for 47 years. We've even got the original lettering on the side of these things.
What is this PSMT?
It's the Patiala State Monorail Trainway.
What is the history of this monorail?
Well, it was built in 1907 for the Maharaja by Colonel Bowles, and it ran for 20 years, came into this engine shed, never ran again. All that's happened is the rails have been buried by wind-borne dust. Trees have grown up round the track over there between 2 wagons. But apart from that, the climate's so good, you see, that everything has been preserved very well indeed. You see, the principle of this monorail was for temporary light railways for building factories, moving materials about on construction sites. And they were never in one place for more than about 1 month. And it didn't really matter what the condition of the ground was like. You see, it only had the one rail under the centre, and the weight was about 90% on the rail, 10% on this wheel, which ran on the road to steady it. But after 20 years going over the same track, it got into a fair amount of difficulty because of the grooves worn by the iron wheel here.
Are there any such other systems in other countries?
Not this system. This system was only used in India. The engines, these engines themselves, came from Berlin. They're Ornstein and Koppel. The main thing you see now is, having found it, we've got an opportunity of saving it. I don't mind how long it takes to get it put back into working order. The important thing is that anything as historic as this just should not be cut up and sold for scrap. But you know, if we could get this thing to Delhi, lay a bit of this track, because there obviously is still plenty of track in the yard here. If we could do that, this would be an absolute winner. It really would.
Indians are great travellers within their own land. Some of them, you'd think they almost lived on trains. The vast bulk of them travel hard, third class, for hours and hours and days and days. Patience. Patience is the thing. And no one has more of that than the Indians. We shall arrive sometime, somewhere. We always do. An Indian railway station is more than a stopping place. It is, in fact, a way of life. Indian people don't go to railway stations. They inhabit them, sometimes literally so. The station is a social centre, a nexus of life, a bazaar, an island of activity in the midst of 800,000 villages, where you can come by almost anything you want, from an orange to a bangle. It may be a couple of days or 3 before your train is due, so what can be the hurry? In the meantime, on the station, one plays, waits, lives, waits some more while time slips by, washes, eats, sleeps, reflects on eternity. Above all, waits. Even on the track, there are pickings to be made. Even cinders are not without value in a poor country. And Indian railway values and economics are not to be judged by Western standards. Of course, there are hundreds and thousands of ticketless travellers every day. The railways tolerate them. What else could they do? Benares on the Ganges is the holiest place on the holiest river for all pious Hindus. At sunrise, it is a place for the cleansing of the soul. Yet this peculiarly sacred place is one of the major centres of the Indian railways. Most of the pilgrims come to Benares by train, after all over India to this especially hallowed riverside, where one washes away one's spiritual impurities in the Ganges, though perhaps acquiring a few physical ones in the process. And the tireless Mike Sato is still at work, still busy on the enshrining of the great Indian railway system on film, tape and memory, and coaxing the powers that be not to forget what the railways were all about.
All over India one finds, amongst the great family of railwaymen, the generosity and kindness which has been so much a tradition of railwaymen. You find drivers who will invite you onto their footplate and quite frequently extend that hospitality beyond that of the footplate and even into their own homes.
It's very, very kind of you to ask me to this festival, because I've never been inside a family house during a Diwali festival before. And this is really the Hindu New Year.
Yes, New Hindu Year.
New Hindu
so
Year.
We are everything we start today.
Yes.
Diwali is in fact the autumn festival of lights, when every Hindu home is aglow in honor of the coronation of Rama, the god king, or the king god, who could possibly know after 2,000 years. It's dedicated to Lakshmi, goddess of prosperity, so every little lamp and light is auspicious for both this world and the next. Now we really take to the hills. This is what the true railway buffs all wait for, the famous Darjeeling Himalaya Railway. This is the spectacular little toy train with its 2-foot gauge, scrambling up the mountains on gradients sometimes 1 in 20, chasing its own tail in extraordinary loops and curlicues. A single-line track with all the down trains going one after the other, and then all the up trains going up. Sometimes the track is too steep even to go in loops, so the train has to reverse itself onto a new level, while the one 5 minutes behind busily pursues it. It takes 8 hours to do its 54 miles, and it isn't always quicker by rail. Not when you can hop off at one side of the loop and hop back again on the other. You learn these techniques only through experience. At the little hill town of Kurseong, the little hill train runs smack down the middle of the main street. This is road-rail integration of the closest kind. For a while, the train is a tram. For all little hill towns, the train is an event, an occasion. It is the train that links these remote places with everywhere else. This is quite particular. For Mike Sato, a special little train, as befits a specialist. An observation coach for the #1 connoisseur of all Indian trains, and the Himalayan toy train in particular.
How many of the B-class engines are still working?
All 25 of them
25,
are working.
they're all working.
And online we have 16 of them.
Every so often, of course, some disaster strikes this railway. The monsoon washes away large sections of the track. And every time this happens, those of us who love it feel this must be the final death knell of the railway, which, after all, is losing money to the extent of 75% of its operating costs. But there are strong arguments in keeping it alive. First of all, if it were closed, 2,000, 2,500 people would be without a job in an area which certainly can't provide alternative employment. But even on the emotional side, or the more emotional side, as seen by the railway enthusiast, this is surely one of the most famous, one of the best known of these hill railways. I don't think anybody could fail to be moved by the excitement of the toy railway, as it's called, up to Darjeeling. It's always known in a most friendly fashion as the toy railway. And for 54 miles, this exciting little railway plods uphill over the top at Goom, right on top of the world, because when you come through Goom and into the famous double loop at Batasya, you get your first glimpse of the snow and Kanchenjunga looming behind Darjeeling, which at that point lies about 600 feet below you.
Now the downward coasting ride towards Darjeeling. Darjeeling, one of the famous hill stations of the high northeast, squashed in at 7,000 feet between Sikkim and Nepal, almost within the shadow of Everest. It is possible to find parts of India that aren't within a bullock cart's ride of a railway line, but it isn't easy.
Hello. कौन सी गाड़ी है? अच्छा हम जा रहे हैं बंद करने के लिए.
India is so big, so various. 15 recognized languages and uncountable dialects, which could well have been a great balkanized confusion had the railways not, in their long, lumbering way, united it. Wherever you are in India, when the train comes, everything stops for the train. And when the train is gone, India takes over again. It isn't very beautiful, really, but it is beautiful. And because it's part of life, it isn't immortal. This will go one day, unless Mike Sato and his friends succeed and insist that it shall not go, or at least not go unrecorded and unsung.
So much for the Indian railways and their splendid steam locomotives. The future of railways all over the world is very much in doubt. But so far as private railways are concerned and preserved lines, steam is with us still and likely to be so. So here's to the next time.